Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the Adventures Travel Club television show. You are looking at Pest. Actually, we are on the Pest side, and we're looking at Budapest, really. In fact, what we're going to look at in just a moment is the Blue Danube River, which looks a little blue today, kind of blue-gray, a little bit out there, doesn't it, Betty?
Yeah, they described that Danube River as on one side, of course, is Buda and the other is Pest, but one are plains, and when it's very flat, etc., then you know you're in Pest, and when you're in the mountains, then it's Buda.
Right. And we're looking at Pest over there on the other side of the river.
Very flat plains.
Hey, that river looks a little more green than it does blue right at the moment. I don't know.
Well, doesn't water have a tendency to fluctuate in color sometimes,
Yeah,
depending on
does.
the algae or whatever's inside of it?
Depending, I think, a lot about how the light hits it, and how it is, what time of day it probably is.
And
Anyway,
how much pollution.
I just had to give you another panoramic view of Budapest, and which I think is very nice. And the bridges here are really quite beautiful, and a lot of the architecture that you see is also very, very nice.
Do you know who built that bridge?
The bridge builder.
Oh, come on. I mean, really, it was built by a Scotsman. Can you believe? Yeah. His name was Adam Clark.
Okay.
Now, you want to hear more?
Sure.
That enough?
No, go ahead.
Okay, he built that, and they charged a toll, and everybody got angry because even the nobles had to pay a toll on it. But he said, "No, I'm sorry. What's sauce for the goose, sauce for the gander." So they all paid a toll, and of course that helped with the expense of the bridge.
Everybody had to pay.
Everybody had to pay. Well,
Whoa.
and probably through the nose in the beginning.
So there was a tax to go across the bridge. Well, I guess we have the same thing here.
I think we learned from them.
Yeah, I think maybe we probably did.
No, that's
and,
what
and
you
even
do.
after the bridges are paid for, it seems like they don't take the taxes off it. Oh, of course, they need it for maintenance, so that's okay. Let's listen to our guide now.
And the Holy Trinity Square, which received its name from, of course, the Holy Trinity Monument, and it dates back to 1702 when the big plague killed off 2/3 of the inhabitants of Buda, after it had killed off half of Europe. You know, these big epidemics were weird. They just came and left in a couple of years, and they never came back again. So it was interesting. They were just vanished. They just vanished. And the only thing they could do was for the lepers to separate them from the others, but nothing else against the others. So here this is the Coronation Church in the 15th century. It originally was founded in the mid-13th century after the Mongol invasion, when Batu Khan and the Genghis, they had Genghis, it was a rank, it was not the name. The Genghis was the main Khan. So when he became the main Khan, then he had this fixed idea of invading the rest of the world and killing off everybody. So they did not just invade things to attach it to their empire and develop it or something. They just killed off people. That's what I call psychosis. And then after the Mongol invasion, the local king ordered that all over the place stone fortresses and fortified churches had to be constructed, because beforehand there were only earth forts, which is not very efficient. So they constructed, set a good example, the royal family constructed this fortified church, which was much different. It was Romanesque style, with thick walls, small. It was more a fort than a church. And also the royal palace they constructed. And it was reconstructed in the 8th century. And it became the Coronation Church in the 15th century, when the coronation of King Mátyás took place here. He was the most beloved king in history, and he was also called Matthias the Just, because Mátyás the Just, he was just to the people. And justice is an integral part of people. So their morals are very important, and the mores. So here around you see the same white towers that you have seen already on the way coming up. It's new compared to the rest. It's 1902 only, and it dates back to this period of time when they just wanted to renovate the things and give a nice frame to the church. There was nothing there, so they just wanted to make something there. And it's 7 tribes, 7 towers, 7 Hungarian tribes conquering, 7 towers represent them. The church was exceptionally used by the Turks in the Middle Ages, which means that they invaded Buda, invaded Hungary with it, and they thanked to God in this church, which was turned to be a mosque, that they could take Hungary so easily. because the Hungarian landlords were fighting each other instead of them. So on the walls and on the columns, the 19th century architects let us see how it had been before in honor of this part of history when it was dominated by the Turks. On this side, but it's a Roman Catholic church named, it's actually not Matthias, it's just commonly called Matthias or Matthias. It's Our Lady's Assumption Church of Buda, but nobody would know it. We call it Mátyás Church. And this was the old town hall of Buda, typically Austrian, as there were very few Hungarians living in cities. This was the Jewish street, for example, all the way. Then there was a German street, a French street, Serbian or Greek street, but no Hungarians. And depending on who settled down, at that time there were not yet Chinese coming over, but there were Europeans coming, and the Jews. And here you have the financial ministry, which is now old financial ministry, neo-Gothic, like 19th century but in Gothic style, and it's now just offices. And that's the Hilton Hotel, very strange looking. The Hilton got the permission to set up the only Hilton Hotel in Hungary in one condition, that they had to integrate the ruins of an old Dominican monastery they found there, and they did it very interestingly. So it's now in the hotel, because it was so much bombed that they couldn't renovate it at all. They couldn't even find the ruins.
Well, there we got a little touch of Hungarian music. The kids are out there entertaining all of the tourists. And believe me, this day there were a lot of tourists up here, weren't there, Betty?
And you know, it pays off. There's always a little dish or something that you show how you appreciate their talents.
Yeah, it's nice.
Monetarily.
It was good. It was nice to hear. Well, we are going to go inside the church in just a moment. I have to apologize again. There is no light inside there. I mean, no light. These Gothic churches were not built to let in a lot of light because they all had stained glass windows, I guess. But anyway, our guide is going to explain to us a little bit about some of the history again, and a little bit more about what we are going to see here inside of the church.
This was after the Turks. It was used by the German community. There was their cemetery around, and then all the way even a Reformed church used it. And then in the 19th century it became again a Roman Catholic church, Our Lady's Assumption Church, as you see. And this is the #1 church. This is the bishop's seat in Budapest. But in the time of the foundation of the Catholic Church in 1000, there was neither Buda nor Pest existing, so none of the parts. And so there only came a bishop here in the 20th century when the Pope, some years ago, nominated a bishop for Budapest, but otherwise there hadn't been any before, because there was no Budapest in the time of the foundation of the 12 bishop seats in 1000 by the first king, who was canonized for it. Saint Stephen, originally born as pagan, his name was Vojk, and then he realized that when the Hungarians came from the east, were pagan, nomadic, with several wives, carrying weapons and fighting, doing raids against other peoples, then it was okay in the East, but it's not anymore okay in Europe, because they couldn't just go on living according to their own reality. in a totally different reality of Europe. And the reality meaning the things that exist. So for the Hungarians, the things that existed was that they had several wives, they were pagan, living in tents, doing whatever they liked to do. And in Europe, they were set up rigid feudal Christian states with knights and so on. For the Hungarians, it was totally a misery to arrive here. And he realized that in Europe, they had to somewhat behave like the Europeans, otherwise they would be annulled in very short way. And he baptized himself and received the name István, which is Stephen in English, and was canonized for baptizing the people after his death. He died in 1038 when he was more than 60 years old, which in that period of time was an unbelievably high age. Because people with 12 were married, with 15 they were already in the army or something, and with 30 they died. 35 was a kind of a beautiful age already. And he lived more than 60 years, which he considered to be a gift of God because he didn't have a successor. The problem was that his only son died. He had 5 daughters. They all died in hemophilia, and the only son died because of a boar that killed him. That's what you see there. He was 19. The whole family became very Catholic, and 7 members of the 300-year-old dynasty, because for 300 years they existed, then they died out in lack of son, and there were 7 canonized members. And they were very spiritual beings, very spiritual people, with very, strong radiating nature. And it's described in history books that they were really kind of spiritual posts wherever they appeared. They had a big effect on other people.
Marv, the symbol of Hungary is St. Stephen's crown, and it's amazing. He never did wear it, but it was made about 100 years after his death. Mm-hmm. But it's so precious to them. At the last days of the World War II, that crown was brought to the United States, and it stayed there at Fort Knox until 1978 when it was returned to Hungary. It still is the outside or outward symbol of the nation's existence. So they really admired this man. He was a great symbol for all of the people of Hungary.
Never got to wear the crown.
Never got to wear the crown. I'm sure he wore other crowns that weren't as pleasant, though, in his reign after. Yeah.
Maybe had a lot of crosses to bear, too. Well, we're going to go down the street. And, one night I had eaten in a little restaurant there on a previous trip to Hungary, but we'll talk about that later on. This is very interesting, here what she has to tell us about this horse statue.
Okay. I would call your attention on a certain thing on the horse that is polished by the Technical University students every year. Funny enough, they appear with a little ladder and they tell these funny poems to that part of the horse beneath or below. Mm-hmm. And then they polish it to get good results at the exams. And they do it, very seriously. And even old students come, like old people, holding the board, 1962, 67, and so on. And they still do come. I have seen them, hundreds of them. And they know these old poems saying about the horse thing, and then they tell it all together and so on. It's quite fun to see them. So that's why it's so shiny.
Okay, so Betty, next time you want to go to school, and you want to make good on your exam, then you have to go recite a poem to the horse, and then you have to rub the underside of the horse, the shiny part there. That's supposed to bring you good luck.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult to describe what exactly it is you're supposed to do when you do that.
Well,
use your imagination.
Leave it to your imagination. This is the backside. We were looking on the riverside over the Danube. From the church in this area that's up here on top of the hill. So now we're looking at the other side, which would be more of the residential area of Budapest. And then we're going to drop down, and we're actually going to go through a tunnel because we're going to go back over to the other side of the river.
We are crossing the tunnel, as you see. The laws of Murphy are not working at the moment because we have our freeway, and those people are all standing in the other lane. So the tunnel was also constructed in the same year as the chain bridge in 1852. being the first permanent standing bridge between Buda and Pest, set up by the so-called, and they were differently considered in front of the law as the commons. The nation consisted of the aristocracy, and neither the citizens nor the peasants were part of the nation, only the aristocracy. And their role, in exchange, was to protect the country in case there was a danger. And first of all, he thought that there should be a bridge over the Danube so as to make communication possible in the country, and roads should be constructed and railroads as well, and banks should be established so as to give credits for these constructions and for any development possible. And that's why he's called the greatest Hungarian. On your left-hand side, you see the Parliament building, which is the largest building in the country with more than 600 rooms. And it was always air-conditioned and centrally heated since the 19th century, and that's why the windows don't open. Academy of Sciences on your left side, and the corner also founded by this greatest Hungarian, whose statue is standing on your left-hand side in between the trees. He was the first aristocrat to learn Hungarian, because the Hungarian language was considered to be a barbarian, degraded language. And no aristocrat spoke it. They spoke German. Like in Russia, they spoke French. They didn't speak Russian. Here either. Here you see casinos on both sides. Right-hand side is Las Vegas, situated in the Atrium Hyatt. Here Sly, Sylvester Stallone, has a share. On your left-hand side, the Ministry of Interior. There are 9 casinos otherwise in Budapest. Legally, they are all game casinos. The Chinese and the what am I explaining? Chinese and the Russians are the big gamblers. Overwhelmingly Chinese and Russians. Right-hand side, the Financial Ministry, the big building, the Heron China shop on your right, and the end of the shopping zone.
That's the
Here on your right, you will see in a second, constructed already, after 45 years of lag in between. The communist regime exploded the old National Theatre because it was in the way of the development, they said. It was a barrier to the development of the city for some reason, so they exploded it. And ever since we didn't have a National Theatre, and now after 45 years of constant debates about it, who should construct, who should plan it, who should pay for it, where it should be, now they decided themselves, and it will be here on your right side. And they work day and night, every day in the week. We are getting into the Andrássy Avenue, which is the most beautiful street, in my opinion, in Budapest, with trees. And it was set up from the 1870s on, and the high society bought properties in this section because it became the new residential area in the Pest side in the second half of the 19th century. Because in 1896 there was a big expo organized in the city park where we are heading now to show what the Hungarians achieved here in the 1,000 years of history. Looking on your left side, the largest church, Roman Catholic Church, the St. Stephen's Basilica, opened for the World Expo, but unfortunately it collapsed and they had to reconstruct the whole thing, and it was only finished in 1905. It was actually not a World Expo in 1890, 50 seats. In neo-Renaissance Italian style, left-hand side, the Opera building, and the first iron curtains to solve the question of fire. What if there is a fire in the rear, then how will people leave and how will they survive? So they found out that if the iron curtain on the stage goes down, it can keep away the fire for 4 hours and the audience can leave the building. And there are many and big gates. It's absolutely golden inside, and it's absolutely worthwhile to see it at 3 o'clock when there is an opera visit in English. It's a beauty. You should also see the Parliament if you could, but you can't because it's only open in the morning for public. But it's a wonder also.
Well, I can certainly see why the folks built their houses. The fancy folks built their houses and moved in this particular area because this is a beautiful
it's
street.
Beautiful. Marv, I found it most interesting what she had to say about the Iron Curtain, because we have used that word so much, with the Iron Curtain in Germany coming down, and it came from a fire screen on the back of the theater, huh?
Yeah.
The word itself.
To keep the
fire out.
Keep the fire out. And of course,
Uh-huh.
in the early days, probably when those buildings were built, they used gas. Not electricity, but I would imagine probably gas. And so you had a lot of fires.
That would be a worrisome
Right.
thing.
She's going to tell us a little bit now about the gypsies. And of course, we've all heard about the Hungarian gypsies in the past.
Gypsies are actually people who came from northern India with the Turks, and they were wandering nomadically living and so on, and they more or less kind of kept this attitude. They don't wander with their tents anymore in Hungary, at least not in Romania, yes, there still are many who are wandering, and they are not homogenic either, they are different kinds, and not all of them are musicians. Actually, very few of them are musicians. The musician gypsies are very talented and very special people, but they live more like anybody else. Like they live in normal houses, where they are clean and so on. And not all of them are like that. And many of them are basically, unfortunately, criminals. And a majority of them, I would say. So in Hungary, they represent 9% of the population, being over 1 million in the country, but yes, 9% of the population, but more than 60% of the assassins are gypsies who are in prison at the moment. I mean, according to the statistics of the prisons. So the number of criminals is extremely high among the gypsies. The double cross means the apostolic rite that was donated to the ever Hungarian king by the Pope in 1000 for this great work of baptizing the whole people, the whole nation. Franz Joseph returned this rite to the Pope in the mid-19th century. Around the column you see 7 equestrian statues in the middle of the square, representing the 7 Hungarian tribes who conquered the Carpathian Basin. The Carpathian Mountains are high mountains around Hungary. Basically, Transylvania is the Carpathian Mountains. Not anymore part of Hungary, but at that time it was, until short 1,000 years in 1920.
This is really quite a beautiful monument. And under the pillars there, the statues of the heroes. And of course, we look on top of this column, as she had mentioned before, and we see that double cross up there on the cross, and that was given by the Pope to the King of Hungary. He evidently really kind of forced Christianity, I guess, upon the nation, right?
No doubt about it. He did.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't accepted by all of them. And of course it wouldn't be. You can't force your belief on other people.
Right.
You can just probably do the best you can to do a little proselytizing. But
well, it seems like with all of the various cultures that were in there and that had, taken over the country, you would have probably a variety of religious beliefs, I would suspect.
yeah, but Stephen himself was such a pious, holy, good man.
Mm-hmm.
He truly was. And his reign was such a successful reign. Too bad about his son that it didn't continue, because then when he didn't have an heir, then the whole thing just sort of deteriorated
Right.
again.
Well, it looks like we're going to Disneyland. Actually, we'll get an explanation on this in just a moment. We just crossed the bridge, too, where there's an artificial pond there that in the wintertime you can put on your skates and skate all over the place.
The big expo in 1896 with hundreds of other sites whereby they wanted to represent what the Hungarians achieved during 1,000 years of statehood. The latest technologies, the latest windmills or whatever they had, plows in those days, were all exhibited. Even houses, complete villages were set up out of papier mache, they say, pressed paper or wood. And it was so popular that this building was not ruined afterwards, after 2 years of the World Expo, but it was rebuilt out of stone. This was the most popular site here then, and it's empty because it serves for nothing. It just shows different architectures. Gothic style, Baroque style, inside left-hand side Romanesque style, and Renaissance style on the right. So we will walk through and through the park and get back to the bus.
Still think that this looks like we're going to Disneyland.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Marv, she keeps using the word Mygar a lot.
And you see that written all over the place.
Yeah, and there's a history. The reason it is that over 1,000 years ago there were tribes of horsemen, and they were called Mygars, and they rode into Hungary over the mountains from Asia and settled in Hungary. And the Hungarians today, most of them are descendants of the Mygars, and the word Mygar means Hungarian. How about that?
I think that's absolutely brilliant.
Oh, I thought so too. No, but it is. I mean, it's so interesting.
And did you realize that the gypsies came from where they came from?
Well, we always think
Northern
of the
India?
No, but we always think of them coming from Romania. In the books that you read and things, they're always from Romania.
Well, she said they migrated, I guess, with the other folks there. So. And that whole area, probably there's migration, not just in what we know as Hungary today. But I am so thrilled to be able to see this area again. I was here once before, Betty, and the Hungarian movie company was making a motion picture here. It was kind of interesting to watch there, and you can say, my golly, look, the sets were already built for them.
I'll say they had it made in the shade, huh?
Beautiful. This is and of course you know that I'm kind of nutso for architecture anyway, so I want to make sure that I got enough shots here to share with everybody here in the audience with this, because this is really quite beautiful. And there you go, Mygar, and there's a museum, right? Hungarian museum.
Yeah, the architecture is so diversified. Every time you look at a different building, there is a different type of architecture.
It's nice that they have expos, and that they save the things like that. Remember in San Francisco, well, of course, I wasn't alive then, but where they just
sure?
Yeah, I think so. They saved just those few buildings, and now there are just a few of them around. Of course, a little lake up there, but at least they saved something out of it too. So, but you know what? Look who's here.
Isn't that nice?
George
Welcome
Washington,
home, huh? Yes.
George Washington. Isn't that something? I know that was a surprise the first time I saw that come in the park here, where this is all located, of course, and there's good old George right there.
Yeah, Marv, I neglected to get the history of that to find out how he came to be there. Do you know anything about it?
Well, he was really Hungarian,
And they brought him home.
Yeah.
Huh?
No, I think it was a gift probably from
it must have been a gift from Washington or from the United States.
Maybe a gift of the Hungarian U.S. people, who became Hungarians who became United States.
Well, I'll bet we'll hear from some of our viewers.
Anybody knows, give us a call. In fact, give Betty a call anyway at 488-7443, because you want to sell them some trips, right,
I want
Betty?
to sell you some trips.
Right. Hey, that's all the time that we have, and we hope that you enjoyed our adventure. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.